Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Getting Ready Materials webinar. My name is Justin Wilson, and I serve on staff with the gathering. This evening, we have Pastor Ed Kay, who serves as the team leader for the curriculum team. And he has a great presentation for us this evening, and super excited to share the resource, a little sneak peek of it tonight. Two quick things before we get started. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to add it to the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer those at the end. And then finally, we wanted to give a special thanks to the ELCA Foundation for sponsoring this Zoom webinar series. The Foundation's ministry is to help congregations and individuals make an impact in the world. One of the ministries of the Foundation is providing socially responsible investing for ELCA congregations and ministries which follow the guidelines and priorities of the ELCA. If you or your ministry would like to learn more about their services, we encourage you to visit elcafoundation.org for resources and information on how to contact your regional gift planner. And with that being said, I will pass it over to Ed.
Thank you. All right. Welcome. My name is Ed Kay. I have the privilege of serving as the team leader for the curriculum team, and it's a privilege to be able to share some of the fruit of our work with you all tonight. Our curriculum team has a number of other projects that we're involved with. One that you might have already seen come out was some revisions and some work around the Tips and Tricks Handbook that is available for youth leaders, both preparing for the gathering, but just in general, it's great for youth ministry leadership across the board. Of course, these Getting Ready materials that we'll talk through a little bit tonight. Our team does some work with adult orientation videos that will be coming out in the next couple of months and leading up to the gathering as well. During the gathering itself, we have something called the Voyage Experience, which will be a part of the Interactive Learning Day. Will be an opportunity to engage more deeply in the biblical themes and the biblical passages for the daily themes. And then finally, our team kind of has a general purpose of helping to weave together all of the teams, particularly the programming teams, with the gathering theme altogether, so that there's some cohesion from experience to experience throughout the gathering. And so I have the privilege of serving with 5 other members of my team. I serve as a pastor in suburban Baltimore, Lutherville, Maryland, aptly named for a Lutheran church. My colleague Shell Huth is a deacon serving at United Lutheran Seminary in Pennsylvania, and she's my assistant team leader. Priscilla Paris Austin is a pastor who serves in Seattle, Washington. Stephen Helm is a youth worker in Tampa, Florida. Victoria Hoppus is a youth worker who works in Indianapolis, Indiana. And Zoe Gross, who is a young adult living in South Carolina and is in the process of moving to Virginia Beach. And so you will see a number of these areas that we work on, and you'll see a picture of our team a little bit later as well that help to assemble this particular resource. Each of the program areas that we have responsibility for has a sub-team that's working towards that, and you'll see a little bit more of that when we get into the Getting Ready materials themselves. So the Getting Ready materials, in a nutshell, are a resource for helping gathering groups get ready. In many ways, we approach this project as a liturgy of sorts, a way to move through the experience of preparing for the gathering, to go deeper into the themes and the scripture that will be a part of our experience together. And like liturgy, if you open up our ELW, you see a lot of rubrics in there. You see that there's a lot of flexibility. And so that was also really important to the process of creating this resource, was to make sure that it was very flexible for the variety of contexts and gatherings that happen in congregational settings. So regardless of your size or context, you should find these resources accessible to be able to use. And that was one of our primary goals in creating the resource in the first place. What happens in preparing a group is the creation of community. And so these resources take a lot of time, and you'll see that throughout all of the sessions, to be able to help congregations bring their groups together and help them form relationships. That happens through conversations and theological reflections, some group building activities, whether that's online or in person, or a mix of a group who might be gathering in those ways. opportunities to learn about Minneapolis, our host city, but also opportunities to connect back in with your home context. Because while the gathering is a powerful experience that we'll have in Minnesota, it's also important that we're able to translate that experience back into our home context as well. And these are resources that are shortly to be available for you. On June 22nd, they will be released and available on the Gathering website. And you can look for special invitations to find those when we reach the 22nd. Part of the purpose of the gathering as well is to reflect on God's boundlessness, which being the theme for the gathering, you will see that released throughout the different aspects of the daily themes, and that main theme coming from Ephesians chapter 3, the whole of that passage, which will be actually the first day's daily theme and will be the focus of the first unit in the Getting Ready materials, is from chapter 3, verses 14 to 21. But this theme verse that you will see often, and probably by the time you make it to Minneapolis, we'll have it memorized with the rest of your group, is from the CEV version of the Bible. I want you to know all about Christ's love, although it is too wonderful to be measured. Then your lives will be filled with all that God is. And so we're excited to be able to talk about all the boundless natures of who it is that God is and how God acts in our lives and in our world. And so that is primarily done through the daily themes. And I believe this is one of the first times that you're able to see these daily themes and the scripture passages that the gathering leadership has brought together to explore these more deeply. So on the first day, which is also the focus of our first unit, we hear about God's boundless love. And again, this will come from that theme passage in Ephesians 3, using the theme passage from Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus. The second day's daily theme, which is Unit 2 in the Getting Ready materials, is about God's boundless creation. And we have this beautiful story, poetic story from Psalm 104 that really reflects on the narratives that we find in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. The third unit, the third day of the daily themes, is God's boundless forgiveness. And here we have the story from Luke 15. It's a very familiar story to many of us, often called the prodigal or the wayward son, sometimes focused around the older son, sometimes focused around the younger son, sometimes focused on the father and his interactions with his two sons. But we'll have the opportunity to engage in forgiveness as part of our time together. Unit 4, which is the fourth daily theme of the gathering week, is about God's boundless invitation. And we dig also into Luke, but much earlier in Mary's song. Often we call it the Magnificat. We hear about the power that Mary sings as she prepares for the giving the birth of Jesus. And finally, the final day, Unit 5, the last part of the Getting Ready materials, are focused around God's boundless promise. And so this is from John chapter 11, and this is in the midst of the story when Lazarus has died and Jesus goes to comfort Mary and Martha. And rather than focusing on the results of the promise, we hear the promise actually in what Jesus gives as he talks to Mary and Martha. So these 5 daily themes will be explored in a deeper way in the midst of these Getting Ready materials. And so in each unit, you'll find this, and I'm going to show you the Getting Ready materials in just a moment. We'll get a sneak preview at the first unit. This again will be what is released next week, is every unit has 2 sessions. And so there are 2 opportunities for each of these daily themes to be able to dig in a little bit deeper, explore some conversation, and especially if your group might be meeting over weeks or months, it allows some opportunity to be able to dig in and let things marinate a little bit as your group continues to form and gather. When this material was being put together, our writing team that you see pictured here gathered outside of Dallas, Texas, to be able to dream and plan and consider what it is and what it looks like for congregations bringing their groups together. And so you can see from the group that's here, and I can tell you from our experience that this team represented all the different ways that the broader church might be able to gather together in terms of leadership in church and in church-wide ministries, in different geographic locales across the country, different ages, constituency groups, all the different ways that we tried to gather in. We had someone serving from outdoor ministry and from young adult ministry and a mission congregation, pastors, youth workers. We had a variety of roles and experiences that helped to bring together these materials. And you'll see the primary authors of each unit listed in the front of the Getting Ready materials. Of course, we were just ready to release these right when the pandemic started and shut everything down. And it was clear that in living through the pandemic, we needed to make some adjustments after we had finished our work. And so in early 2021, our team came back together and started working on how we might approach this preparation and this work in a post-COVID world, or in a moving out of a pandemic life. In addition to that, of course, in our host city, but across the country and the world, the death of George Floyd changed everything. And we wanted to make sure that there were opportunities for congregational groups to consider that and to talk about that, both again for the ramifications and implications for our host city, but also for our own home lives, communities, and congregations. And so again, you will see those things highlighted throughout the gathering, Getting Ready materials, and those were adjustments that were made after the initial materials were completed back last summer. And finally, sometimes when you get these curriculums or resources, it can become a little bit much for those that perhaps don't have significant theological education or experience in congregational ministry. We know that many congregations in our church are bringing groups that are led by everyday Christians. And so it was important to us in putting this work together and making these materials available that they would be widely accessible, and that you didn't need to have a theological degree or 10 or 15 years of youth ministry experience in your congregation to be able to access these and prepare your group and feel like you are equipped and ready to be able to lead in their setting. And so finally, it's really important to think about the different ways that these materials can be used. And so the materials were developed, and again, we'll see this when we start looking at the beginning of the actual final product, that these materials are accessible for groups of all shapes and sizes. From smaller congregations, like my congregation might bring 3, 5, 10 people maybe, and we'll use these materials, but congregations that might bring dozens or even hundreds will be able to access these materials and adjust accordingly for the size and needs of their group. We also had materials available so that if a congregation were meeting in person or hybrid or fully online, that there are adjustments and options to be able to consider the different parts of the Getting Ready materials to be used in all of those different ways. So you'll see that in the materials that there are some call outs where digital adaptations might be made, and where a group might be able to make a move from gathering online or in person. There's also some flexibility for how often groups meet. Some groups are going to be assembling over the summer. They will register when registration first comes out and start meeting and preparing in September. And so you'll see that what we might call the classic way of using these materials is once a month, starting in September, going all the way till June, and then you are ready for the gathering with one a month. Lots of congregations will take a little bit longer to get started, and so they might revise using these materials, perhaps combining 2 sessions into one and meeting for 5 or 6 months, or maybe they meet every other week or every twice a month leading up to the gathering, so that they still might use all of the sessions, but over a shorter period of time. There are opportunities to use these in a retreat setting. There are benefits and drawbacks to being able to use these in a longer setting or a shorter setting. And so again, like much of these materials and any curriculum material, you want to make these your own. You want to adapt them to what your particular congregation's needs are, what the availability of your young people and your adult leaders are, and make them your own. And finally, you can use these in a variety of settings. We've used these in my congregation in a sermon series, in council and other meeting devotions, youth Sunday gatherings, lots of opportunities to be able to involve the wider congregation in using these materials. So I want to jump a little bit over to the materials themselves. So here you go. Here is the first look at the Getting Ready materials. So I'm going to walk through kind of the beginning couple of pages and then into the first unit so you can see a little bit of this laid out. I'm not going to read everything, by the way, also. Some introductions, again, the theme verse and main theme passage. You'll see, again, the table of contents that's broken out in 5 units, and each unit has 2 sessions. And so that will be consistent throughout. There is an introduction and welcome from Stephen and Priscilla, who were the primary leaders from our team that helped to pull this together. And then here you'll see the curriculum authors, in addition to Stephen and Priscilla, Elizabeth, Stephanie, Charles, Adam, Sarah, and Nicole, and the units that they particularly worked on, as well as some additional resources that are included throughout to be able to give credit and offer a connection to those authors for their work for us. A reminder, as we go through this, and especially as I mentioned, how individual congregations might have found their way through the pandemic, and particularly when we get into conversations about racism, white supremacy, and other topics that might be difficult, thinking about forgiveness, and things that we might get into conversation about what do we forgive for, and what is difficult to forgive, and what is it that God forgives. A reminder that, I'm just going to read this real quick. We encourage adult leaders to read through and customize each unit. Many youth will have experienced unique and difficult situations over the past 2 years related to the pandemic, racism, grief, and more. Some activities might not be appropriate, effective, or ideal for your group. Consider how your plans for each meeting might best take into consideration the realities of the youth you are serving. So again, you know your group best, and so please adapt for your particular group. As I mentioned, these are the options to be able to look at how you might use them once a month, twice a month, yada, yada. And then particularly meeting online. So there's a lot of options. A lot of us have become very familiar with using Google Meets or Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Skype or whatever kind of online tools that keep connected with each other. And so these are some opportunities to be able to engage in different tools that might be available on a particular platform to help engage with your group. So that takes us into Unit 1. And again, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this a little bit. The text is probably too small for you to be able to read, but again, you'll be able to see it in full next week. Each unit has an overview that you see here on the right-hand side of the page that tells you what's going to happen over the 2 sessions within that particular unit. There are different icons that are listed here when you might need to be paying attention to the clock. So you time your timeout well when we're switching to a Bible verse, when you might be using video or links online, those sorts of things. Then for each session within that unit, there is an introduction and an overview just for that session. And so you have that here for God's boundless love for humanity, and there's an overview for the adult leaders. It gives you some links and things that you might use to be able to prepare. And then in this purple box at the bottom, it is a suggested supply list. So as a leader, you might be able to pull all those things together before you gather your group. As I mentioned, the liturgy at the beginning, we follow in some ways what a service of the word looks like with gather, word, and sending. And so you'll see that outline for each of the sessions. It starts with a gather, which you see here includes encouragement for how to warm up your group and welcome your group, some words to speak and invitation, team building and icebreaker gathering suggestions, activity directions, prayer to begin your time together. Then it moves into the word section, where you'll be focusing primarily on the scripture passage for your particular evening, where it connects with your head, with your heart, and with your body. And then finally, at the end, there is a sending for each one. Our team also developed a dismissal blessing that you might teach at the beginning and would be, again, part of a liturgy, part of a ritual that would be a part of each of your gatherings as you are sending your group out at the end of each time. In each session, there is both, I skipped over it here earlier, but there is a gathering connection in particular to be able to focus on something specific with the gathering, and there is a congregation connection, so you can speak to something specific and some ideas for connecting in with your particular congregational setting. Some of the sessions, like this one, has a handout that you might want to provide digitally or that you can print off and hand out. This is for a skit idea that's in the midst of this session. And so that is listed here. There is a take-home sheet that is available. Again, all of these were included, and they are separate downloads that will be available as well that you can send electronically or you can print off and send home to encourage conversation, continued reflection, perhaps some conversation in the car ride home after the gathering in itself. And there are also opportunities with every take-home sheet to be able to connect with the social media platforms for the gathering using hashtags and photo challenges and things like that along the way as well. So that is one session in a very brief nutshell. And you see then it moves just into session 2 for that same first unit. And it will go into the same liturgy of gather, word, and sending for each one. So I'm going to pause there and invite Justin to come on back. I believe he's been fielding questions that we might want to have some conversation about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ed. We have 4 questions so far. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature and we will try to answer them. So the first one is, where would we find the Tips and Tricks Handbook? So the official handbook. Do you want to go?
You're going to have the better answer of like specifically where to find it. I know it's on the website, but you're going to know exactly where.
Yeah, if you go on the website under the resources tab, and then there's a general tab within the resources page, and you can download that. If you want a printed version of the handbook, you can go to our partners at Old Lutheran. They're selling them for, I think, $10. I would like to connect the getting ready materials to worship. Has anyone set up a list of where the scripture shows up in the Revised Common Lectionary?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I don't think we have, but I would be happy to take that back to our team and pull that together, perhaps in the next week, so that we could share that in the same way. Yeah.
Will this slideshow be available to view after tonight? Yeah, this whole webinar is being recorded and we hope to have it on the website under the webinar tab early next week. Let's see, what is a typical length of each of the sessions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the sessions were primarily developed with the thought that it might be used in 45 minutes to an hour. So again, that's another opportunity to know your group best, that if you've got a lot of talkers, that you probably want to budget that kind of time in. And the little clock icons throughout will help keep you on track with making sure that you're pacing yourself well, so you don't get an hour in and you've still got 20 minutes of material left. But 45 minutes to an hour is the typical time that these are meant to run.
So this one is in reference to Unit 1. If we don't have 5 people for a skit, will there be an option to watch your version of it online? You and your team together?
We do not have a recorded version of us doing the skit. That sounds like maybe a good TikTok idea.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. Yeah, probably not. You could probably adapt, maybe invite some adult leaders to join in or improvise.
You could combine some of the parts.
Are these units for the actual gathering or to do beforehand?
Great question. So they are meant to do beforehand. Again, depending on how frequent your group might be able to meet before the gathering, that would determine how many you might do or which ones you might do. My suggestion would be that if you are meeting for a shorter period of time, and so perhaps in your planning, if you're going to meet 5 times instead of 10 times, I would pick the first session from each unit so that you do have an opportunity to touch on at least one of the sessions and your group will have some exposure to the theme passage for that daily theme. Again, another option might be that if you're starting a little bit later in the cycle of the next academic year, that perhaps you might meet every other week as opposed to once a month. But again, you know your group best and what their availability might be. but they are meant to be done ahead of time. They're all kind of preparation, forming your group and that sort of thing. One of the things that our group will be working on that will be released after the gathering is an opportunity to do some debriefing and some processing of your gathering experience. So there will be a couple of post-gathering sessions that will be made available closer to the gathering, so that as your group comes home from Minneapolis, you may be able to still gather and share in that experience and think about how you might translate that to back home life.
Awesome. One last question that we have is, could these getting ready materials be used for confirmation as well?
I think they could. We really did, and I didn't emphasize this earlier, but I'm glad you asked that question, because there is a recognition, I mean, in my home congregation as well, that when we gather high school young people, that there will be some that might be a part of our group or in our congregation that won't be going to the gathering for whatever reason. And so part of the development of these materials was meant to keep those young people in mind in particular, and in recognition that not every congregation has a youth group and a gathering group. It may be one in the same. And so that you don't have to like dismiss someone because they're not going to the gathering, that there's an opportunity for them to be included. And so I would think that confirmation could be an opportunity to be able to use those as well. Because I think the scripture passages and the themes of the daily themes really fit in well with a lot of the catechetical work that happens in confirmation.
Awesome. Not related to the getting ready materials, but will it be required for participants to be vaccinated? At this time, vaccinations will not be required to attend the gathering. We are still a year out, so but we are encouraging everyone to talk with their healthcare providers and get vaccinated if they are able. A few more just popped in.
Yeah, sure.
What are the dates of the gathering and grades eligible? The dates would be July 24th through the 28th, 2022, and grades eligible, so those entering 8th through 12th grade this fall, so at the time of registration. And I think that's it. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We are so thankful for the curriculum team and the Getting Ready material writers for putting this resource together, and we can't wait to share it with you next week. Again, thank you, and we hope to see you next month at our Multicultural Youth Leadership event webinar with our team leader, Kelly Sherman Conroy. Awesome. Have a good one, everyone.
Great, thanks.